All right, now we're recording. Let's pick it up again. Sorry, Kim.
Yeah, so what I was talking about was the tagging, for instance, the data flows with types of data, for those data, the individuals that are at stake, the purpose of collection, the purpose of processing operations, seeing that those are compatible. That's already going towards compliance a bit. So that's why I was asking before, does it make sense to put it in here? Because yes, it's still privacy threat modeling, but I don't want to like put everything in this thing, and
I
maybe we
think
should
data
first
collection makes a
prioritize the
ton of
security stuff.
sense, not just from a privacy, but I mean, there's a lot of different reasons why, security, privacy, etc. Um, I think I think that makes a lot of sense. Why you're collecting something.
So what we're
Um,
looking for here, so this would be similar to say the safe harbor uh, terms in HIPAA, for instance, where you have things out there like social security number and those kind of things and date of birth. And is that kind of what you're talking about? Otherwise, I'm completely lost.
Sorry, I was
So you,
yeah,
so you
safe
can
harbor.
look at the data and say, these are the things that make this identifiable. These are the things you do not want in there because they're going to be impacts to privacy.
So to be able to assess that, you need to have more information than what I might be making it too simple, the difference between security and privacy. But from a security perspective, you typically just say, I have a blob of information and I want to keep it secure. Whether that's an email address or a physical address or a zip code or whatever, you just want to keep it secure. From a privacy perspective, you might want to, well, not you might, you ideally for certain assessments need to know the types of data, because
Sure.
then only you can assess, if you combine these bits and pieces of information, what additional information you can deduce, whether you actually need them from for that specific purpose. Maybe that's just too detailed. So the more information, the more details you have on the types of data, the more fine-grained your privacy analysis can be.
So that is very similar to this HIPAA safe harbor. Things like you cannot have a date of birth, but you could have a year of birth, for
Sure.
instance.
Yeah.
Okay. And
Yeah.
and that's how HIPAA splits the difference on that. Okay.
Yeah.
So yeah, that's yeah, I think that's a good thing. By the way, huge amounts of confusion about that. My whole area is cybersecurity and medical devices, Kim. So I
Okay.
paint everything with medical device and medical.
Yeah,
All right.
no, makes sense.
So
I think the medical domain is really interesting. I've done quite some projects in that area as well, because there is that interesting, well, consent and all that stuff that's very
yeah,
well known
yeah,
there. It's not always used in the same way as from a privacy perspective we may want to, but the concepts are there. So
correct.
it's
Yeah.
yeah.
Yeah. And there's huge amounts of confusion in the industry for medical device manufacturers as to what constitutes uh, an information that could be used to de-anonymize a record. And so that is, I think, yeah, anything that can shed light on that, I'm all in favor of.
Yeah, well, I'm not saying we can solve that, because there's still very much unclarity on what the identification is and when it's sufficient. But whatever we can do would be good. You brought your popcorn, Izar?
I was on a call yesterday, and one of my dogs came in my office, and she loves popcorn, so we were sharing popcorn yesterday afternoon. Has nothing to do with threat models.
Not
Uh,
everything needs to be about threat modeling, but like 99%.
Fair. What did I
But
miss?
yeah, go ahead.
What did I miss?
Talking about privacy, so really interesting stuff. No, but so the first question is, isn't it bringing in too much additional information? But also, isn't it, if you see any conflict, like we don't need that stuff, or it's becoming too complicated, I can try to write out some of the like main attributes to go from, and then you guys can see whether it makes sense from a security perspective, and we can bring it to the broader community to see what we missed from a privacy perspective. But I want to make sure that the basis is there first before I start bringing in the privacy concepts.
Yeah. No, that would be great, Kim. Even just starting with the basics, like and we kind of have this, but not quite in Cyclone. I'm not to the detail that I think we need, because like in CycloneDX we have data flows that have like directional thing, like where it's coming from, where it's going to, and we have data classifications, which is fine. But what we don't necessarily have is the data being captured in the first place? Do we want to go down that retention? Talk about retention? I don't know.
Yes.
Do we want to
Yes.
talk about, whether or not the data is encrypted at rest, type of thing? We have custodians and that we've got basically the three roles for data governance. And then we might also want to think about if information is being captured, we might also want to think about the opposite, information being distributed, published, available.
Shared, yeah.
And then what is, I don't want to get into modeling access control, because that would be a thing that would be a rabbit hole we'll never escape from. However, we might want to consider communicating, like, if you're making data available, who who have access to that, without going down the ACL rabbit hole.
Yeah. Wait, so I'm still processing what you said. You don't capture information being captured. So is there a concept of data?
There is a concept of data in CycloneDX. Yeah, you can capture data, and you can model it in CycloneDX, and I can walk you through that if you like. And then of course we also have directional flow of data. We have data flows, right? We have data classifications on the data. We have the stewards and custodians and owners, right? Which can either be individuals, organizations, whatever. So we have a lot of that in place. Is it complete? No. But I'm going to be relying on your expertise to kind of help us make that complete.
Does that live in one place or all over all kinds of places?
Data is a first-class CycloneDX component.
Mm-hmm.
So it can be represented pretty much anywhere in the spec, whether it's a component itself. It can be represented in services. So if we're talking about like a microservice, for example, it can be represented there. So, or if we're talking about like AI, it can be represented there, like training data, right? So it can be used in a lot of different places.
And is there a tool or a procedure that I can use to bring out all the data elements and create something like a data dictionary that can be?
No, but you should create a tool.
Yeah. Yeah.
No, I'm not aware of one. I'm not aware of one. But I do believe, like everything else that CycloneDX has done, we've basically been on the forefront of a lot of this innovation. So tools that did not exist now exist for things that CycloneDX can do. So, and I would expect a very similar kind of thing to happen once we support architecture and threat models and that sort of thing. In a standardized format, a bunch of tools will likely emerge to commercial and open source that never really existed before.
And bit of silly question. So if I define a data element on the TM SBOM, for example, and I want to refer to it in another SBOM, another piece,
Yes, you can do that.
what's the identifier used?
So we have this concept called a bomb link, and a bomb link is a registered URN that basically, so every CycloneDX document basically has an identity. The identity is the combination of a serial number, which is a URN, which is a UUID, and a version, and the version is an integer. And so what bomb link does is it says, well, this version of this serial number, and then you have I think it's a pound sign, and then the identifier within that particular document, because within a document you also have an identifier. So it's basically deep linking to a very specific component in a specific bill of material.
Isar, can I get back to what you were saying before? You were talking about the tool and the data. Do you mean a tool to extract stuff from the TM bomb, or do you mean a tool to extract data from a data inventory to put in the TM bomb?
So in my very warped view of this whole thing, it seems to me that you could end up with a system. It doesn't have one single master CycloneDX document. It has a collection of smaller documents. One of them would be the TM bomb, the other one would be SBOM, blah, 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 blah. And for all kinds of reasons, people would be free to document or to define pieces of data in each one of these different documents. It could even be the same data represented in a different way. That's why I asked about the ID. Or it could be that in the life cycle of the system, data started being generated at a different point when somebody was dealing with a certain piece of SBOM. So what I would like is to be able to take all these documents, extract from them all the data elements, and be able to create a data diagram that shows me this is the name of the thing, this is the content of the thing, these are the flows that it participates in, this is the ID that it has, and then use that to sort of like not only keep things tidy, but to also extract from that knowledge on where the data is, where it gets transformed, where it gets stored, without having to traverse the whole structure of all the documents. Right?
No, that makes a lot of sense.
And again, it goes to that initial vision of the use cases of the TM bomb, where we had the threat linked to a specific vulnerability later on by way of the asset. I would like to be able to link a threat to a vulnerability by way of the data that's involved in there. So if I know that certain data, certain vulnerability impacts an asset, and that asset transforms or stores some piece of data, then I'm able to say this is the impact on the data of that specific vulnerability back there. And the same thing with collection, the same thing with storage and things like that.
No, that makes a lot of sense. I'm thinking right now of like a few commercial products that are in the AI space that basically have products that, you know, do full life cycle, or try to do like everything from, you know, where you obtained your training data from, to the, you know, training and ultimately the inference of the models. And a couple of these companies actually produced today CycloneDX AI bombs. But I don't necessarily know how complete their data is. Theoretically, you could have a separate bomb that really just describes that. And I know pretty much, well, because it doesn't exist yet, right? It would be ideal to have threat modeling information in there, because as I was mentioning to Kim at the conference last week, it's really interesting to me how AI has kind of brought security and privacy folks to the same table, in a way that I've never seen before. So,
And here I thought it was GDPR, but AI is better. Yeah.
Yeah.
So yeah, I'm continuing thinking. So okay, it's evening for me. Excuse me. I'm still finding my words. Data classification. Is there any other classification taxonomy of other types or attributes within SBOM things? Is
No.
that something we want to avoid? I'm thinking about, you have data, but you also have personal data, you have sensitive personal data, you have biometrics, you have all these kinds of things. There is no one size fits all taxonomy as far as I know.
Right.
So that makes it even harder, but I can see some high level categories at least being useful there.
Yeah. So one thing that, yeah, we actually looked for that, Kim. We looked for like a taxonomy. It just does not exist, right? Every organization, every industry basically has their own terms and definitions of what different data classifications are. It might be interesting to start with the type of data, which is something that we don't capture today, like like personally identifiable information, for example, is a type of data.
Yeah.
It's a higher level category, right? So we can kind of start there, maybe, because we don't have that concept in CycloneDX today. It could be financial data, it could be healthcare data, it could be whatever.
Company confidential data. Yeah. Yep.
Yeah.
Security related data, key
Right.
materials and stuff like that. I mean, yeah.
Right. And then we might also want to, and this is why, well, maybe Kim knows, I don't know, what data is actually going to be material under what circumstances. I don't know if we want to go down that rabbit hole or not,
What
but
data is going to be what?
material.
What do you mean?
It's kind of a legal term.
Relevant.
Yeah.
Significant.
There's
Okay.
another one.
Yeah, like if you possess material data, and for example, like you are acquiring like a company, or you have inside information on stock or whatever, that's kind of important in certain use cases.
Yeah. Okay, so we have different classifications of data for different purposes. So that's going to be very interesting to see, because from a privacy perspective, that's less relevant, as was being said before, like you have corporate secrets and stuff, which again, from a privacy perspective, doesn't really matter. From, I don't know if it's security perspective or more a business perspective will be more important. Yeah.
Okay.
Well, that's where it grays between confidentiality and privacy. It's that gray spectrum out there that
Yeah.
I think we have to stop trying to drive a wall between those two and just say, look, it's all comes under the one umbrella. And whether it's corporate secrets or it's an individual social security number, it's all things to be protected. So
yes, that's true. But it's completely different things.
yes.
Yeah.
We play. I was telling Kim when my team met up in San Diego earlier this year. We're just a bunch of security people. We actually played the Linden threat modeling card game, and it was a very enlightening experience for us, because it allowed us to think about the same types of things that we would think about from security, but from a completely different lens. And it was kind of eye-opening, actually.
So I'm gonna quote you on that, if that's okay.
Sure. I would just, change that one word. I can't remember that name of that one word, because again,
Oh,
we had
yeah.
a room of 13 people
I
and
know, yeah. It's
nobody could pronounce it. In terms of like a taxonomy, what we typically do, Kim, in terms of like a spec, what we do is generally is we try to figure out like what we can minimally viably do. And we don't necessarily want to like boil the ocean. We want to get something out there that's going to be useful and impactful, and do it in a way that it can be extended in the future. And that's true for the taxonomy. It's true for basically the entirety of the spec. So just kind of keep that in mind as we start designing some of this stuff. What are the things that we need like now in that first version, and maybe here's some ways that we can build on top of that in the future.
Yep. So now that OWASP and ThreadModCon are behind us, I'll have some more time to work on the things that John and I mentioned. So this prototyping should get easier. But still, one thing that worries me in double quotes a bit is that ThreadDragon and PyTM can be the producers, but we can't be the consumers.
Mhm.
So I don't know exactly how to get that side of the equation happening.
On the consumption side?
Yep.
That's a great question. Well, ThreadDragon theoretically could be a consumer, right? It imports OTM today.
But that's the thing, it would consume only the threat modeling side of the house. I was hoping for something
Oh, yeah.
like go way beyond and show the, not that we can do it, but that there's some value behind it.
Yeah. Like all of the example of all the data, and
Exactly.
yeah, I
Or
got it. Okay.
the vulnerabilities, like the Defect Dojo, bringing it in and using the levels of the assets to say this is higher priority than that.
You know, I was talking to I was talking to the team last week, and it was really interesting to me that Defect Dojo, you know, it has this concept of a finding, but they don't actually define what a finding is. So theoretically, it can be like a vulnerability, it can be like a risk in the GRC sense,
Yep.
right? It can be a lot of different things, which is interesting. And given that Defect Dojo is written all in Python, it should be fairly elementary to create maybe a prototype. We might want to see if there is anybody in the community that would be willing to kind of work alongside us and do those kind of POCs, because I mean, if we can validate our own work and they could simultaneously prove value to their own offering, I mean, everybody wins.
Yep.
Okay. Cool. I like that, Azar. Yeah, because I think writing our own thing from scratch is going to take us. It's going to take us away from the focus.
Mm-hmm. Plus, showing it on something that's already central to the community and already proven to work by
Right.
itself has some good value.
Yeah.
Even if we say, hey, this is just a prototype, we're just showing the idea, but perhaps it might get some more people beyond the 5 of us, I'm including John here, interested in.
Yeah, absolutely. I don't even know if a product like Erius Risk would be.
Again, they would be on the producer side, right?
I don't see them well, they'll consume it, but just not to the extent that you want.
Yeah, consume it as a file format, but I'm explicitly trying to get as far as possible from threat modeling tools to show that there is more value than just a file format.
Right.
Just expand OTM.
Yep, absolutely. That's really good framing.
I'm really interested in doing the whole kill chain here, so that we can say something gets identified here, it adds value here, and vice versa.
Yeah.
So, for example, the Defect Dojo could come up and say, hey, we have these vulnerabilities, and we think that they are important because of APSS and CVSS and all that good stuff, but we would love to know how they impact the threat model. So you would go back to the threat model tool, mark the assets that have those vulnerabilities and say, okay, from now on, these assets are more important than the others.
Right.
So it
Right.
goes both ways.
Yep. 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 And you could theoretically do that all in Defect Dojo.
Yep.
Cool. I like that idea. Would you be willing to write up a few use cases to kind of, I mean, if we're going to talk to the
We got
Defect
some in the
Dojo
doc
community,
already,
what's
but
that?
yeah, we got some in the doc already, but yeah, definitely yes.
Okay, cool. I think we're probably a little too early for that right now, but it's not too early to have the conversations.
Yep.
Cool. All right. So you and John are going to start some prototyping.
Yes.
Let me know if you have any questions. And also keep in mind that, I mean, while we do have to conform to the existing spec,
Mm-hmm.
keep in mind that, this feature is going to be using parts of the spec that doesn't exist yet.
Right.
So don't feel that you have to be confined to the existing spec, because that's not what this
Do you have a
exercise is.
pointer for a document with the absolute must be for something to conform to the spec?
We have a JSON schema, and if your output validates, then it's valid.
Okay, cool.
And then, but because we are developing our own spec, what we typically do, in actually these calls is we will actually live code. We will create a lot of the POCs during the call. And a lot of times we will also create and this is especially important, we will create the part of the JSON schema necessary for validation, because it's the group's responsibility to ensure that all the definitions, the English definitions of the things in the schema are what we all kind of agree upon.
So on that note, that vision of mine of many different files being different bombs, does that happen, or at the end of the day, there's only one document with different sections?
No, you can have multiple documents. I mean, you can combine everything if you so choose. However, it's more complicated to consume, but ideally you'd want to figure out what level of modularity is good enough, because in a lot of cases, you might want to have different levels of access control on different modules. For example, if I'm sharing an SBOM to somebody, right, I might actually have an external reference to the threat model. But, if my customers don't have access to the threat model, but maybe, my government customers do, for example, well, having that kind of modularity allows me to have different access control in these different parts.
Yep, that makes sense.
So figuring out that right level of modularity is kind of important. And we have some guidance, but ultimately it's going to be very industry and organizational specific. And there is I will forward you, let's see, I'll put it in the chat. Well, I'll put it in the Slack channel. I will forward so you know how it works. The bomb link that I described. It's not just a Cyclone. It basically allows us to have this deep linking semantics that is going to be applicable no matter what serialization format is used, whether it's JSON, XML, or protobuf. So let me put that.
Kim, while that happens, question to you, and this may be a silly question, but it's sitting on the back of my head. If I have two different data elements, as we discussed before, what would I need to be able to identify linkability between them?
We discussed that before. I wish I could formalize it. I don't know yet.
No, not formalized. Assume that you have all the knowledge that you want. if you had to later on show to someone these two pieces suffer from a linkability issue, what would you like to see?
Well, if there's a pseudonym that is the same, that's a clear link, but it's really about quasi-identifiers. If you can match sufficient attributes that are the same, then that is sufficiently the same, and therefore you can link them together.
And do they still remain two different pieces of data, or is there value in creating a pseudo data element that basically reflects both of them, and you would be able to do operations on that?
Are you talking about the combination of attributes that links both together, or are you talking about the combination of the two data items that are linked together?
The two data items that are linked together.
I think that we're already talking at the data in production level and not at the more higher level SBOM data items, data attributes level.
No, what I'm thinking is if I have again the idea of the data catalog that comes from the SBOMs, and I can show that two pieces of data have an linkability issue. If there's value in having a data type that's basically an aggregation of data types, or if they continue being by themselves and I just relate to them by their identifiers.
Very easy question. It depends. It can be the same types of data that you just link, multiple entries of the same person that you can link. It can be, yesterday I watched that TV show and today I'm eating that kind of vegetable, but it's both me, so it's completely different data items, but tied together for the same thing. That's a profile. It's I don't know if you can tie it together into one. It's gonna be a blob of
no. What I'm thinking is, in the examples that you just listed, would it be useful from the point of view of figuring out things connected to this linkability to have a new data type that expresses those things being linkable? Or do I need a type that expresses the relationship of linkability between different things? See what I mean?
I'll need to go again.
If I have the what I ate last night and which movie I watched last night, and I figure out that those two things have a linkability issue, do I keep referring to them as separate things with a relationship of linkability? Or is there value in creating a meta type that contains those two things and is basically, if it exists, that's the fact that they are linkable? I'm thinking in terms of like an algebra later on with the data, if there is value in having that data, or if there is equal or more value in just
my initial feeling would be just expressing that they are linkable, because then the mitigation can be to reduce some of the attributes to fix it. And if you make it as a linkable blob, then you're gonna have to change something about that type potentially if you want to make it unlinkable.
The mitigation can be reducing some of the fields. So could it be that if I had the new data type, the fields that appear in there would be only the ones that break the linkability issue? In other words, the new data type is already the mitigation to the problem, and I can express it like that.
But then it's an unlinkable type instead of a linkable type.
Yeah, it becomes
I think linkability is going to be in two different categories in my mind. I mean, you can either have like direct linkability where you have like an identifier of somebody, or a derived linkability. For example, if you've got pizza, frozen pizza, and a movie, well, if you don't have the individual to link, well, I can still, if I had enough information, such as the pizza was purchased in this zip code at this time, then I could derive possibly the individual if that individual paid for it by a credit card, for example.
Yeah. Or even just the time
It's
when
not
you
a direct linkable thing, though.
no,
It would
it's gonna
it would
be based on
require,
quasi.
No, but
Yeah.
you would have,
Right.
I paid for the pizza that I ordered with my credit card. I paid for the pay-per-view, the nice family movie with my credit card.
right.
And now I'm connecting the three things, not only via the credit card, which I pay for a lot of things with my credit card, doesn't mean that they're connected. But the fact that I ate the pizza while I saw the nice family movie comes from the timing of both things. They were ordered at the same time.
Right.
So you see that there's a whole set of relationships in here that we have to manage somehow. And in my head, I'm thinking, will this appear as a relationship object or as a data object that is created by the linkability? And the reason why I'm asking this is looking forward, my threat modeling tool has to be able to express that thing in a way so that I can get to the mitigation that Kim talked about, right? So what makes more sense in terms of figuring things out, having a relationship or having a data type?
Well, I mean, part of POCing is coming up with things that may or may not work.
Yep.
Right. So maybe come to the table with two different proposals, really.
Yep.
Having a concrete example in front of us might actually help us go one way or another.
Yeah.
Yep.
Yeah, I linking will be a different. My God, my words are disappearing.
It's
Worry about
It will be a difficult one to express anyways, because it really depends on what you have, and if additional information is added on, you can have an unlinkable combination, but then I don't know, because of a change in seasons or whatever, or something changes, there might be a new link, and new data is added, and there becomes more
Yeah.
linking.
You might
Yep.
want to consider the concept of maybe having an assertion that this is linkable, but lack of that assertion does not imply that it's not linkable.
Yes.
Absence of evidence is not evidence of absence. Okay.
Right. Right.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah. No, that makes sense. The reason why I went to linkability is that in my mind that's the big one to solve. That's the big one to do
Yeah.
something. I won't say solve, to do something about.
I'm adding on that it doesn't necessarily have to be individual linking, but it can also be group linking. Like all these people who buy pizza
Ethnic group,
will
whatever.
likely also want to buy ice cream, and therefore they are targeted with coupons. Or all those people who live in this neighborhood have a higher chance of a certain disease, so they have a higher insurance fee to pay.
Yeah, but that's a one-to-many from the subject into the object, so that we could express fairly easily. But I'm more focused on what you guys said some seconds ago.
Yeah.
But is that a threat, Kim? Is that linkability a threat, or is that a different kind of thing?
The societal one?
No, just linking in general. That
Linking in
linkability.
general is deducing more information than you originally think. It's not necessarily a threat,
Right.
and it's really hard to avoid, but sometimes it's like, they know that about me. How did that happen? And more importantly, could they actually deduce that? Could they actually process this?
Is
Was
there a
additional ads?
CWE? Is there a CWE that describes this? Do we know?
I think that there is one that talks about too much information, but I'm not sure.
I know CWE is mostly security, so I'm just wondering, because it does have common and weakness, but if common is only specific to security, then I don't know how common
Yeah.
it is.
Check here. Weaknesses.
We obviously want to reuse existing specifications if they are applicable.
Mhm.
Is there any kind of existing taxonomy for this type of thing in the privacy world, Kim? I know we talked about a lack of like taxonomy for like data types and whatnot, but is there like a formal taxonomy outside of maybe like Linden itself to capture this?
Well, there's Linden, there is the soul of taxonomy, which is broader than data privacy. It's more a generic privacy taxonomy. MITRE now also has a panoptic framework, like attack is for security, they have for privacy. So there are categories we can use.
Okay. Okay.
But yeah, no, it's not as detailed and as extensive as what is out there for security.
Right.
So this should be in the development view. No.
You're going down the
As
CWE rabbit
logging
hole.
of
Yeah.
excessive data and exposing sensitive information, but
Right. Yeah. It's usually like a one-time thing, right? It's not the linking of multiple discrete pieces of information.
Those kind of vulnerability chains real quickly get into huge number of issues. And that's why in security, we deal with vulnerabilities atomically and not usually as a chain, even though frequently they're exploited as a chain, 1 or 2 or 3, but it's just because the permutations just go through the roof.
Right.
I was thinking it was last year or year before, I think it was, there was a newspaper article about identifying where the president of the United States is based upon the phone signatures of the Secret Service agents.
Sure.
And it's like, okay, how do you link that? You know? Yeah, I get it. But when you have them clustered together, okay, you know, are they out having coffee or are they guarding the president of the United States, kind of a thing?
Right.
It's challenging, I think. I think that's, from my perspective, this is kind of a bridge too far. This is stuff that, well, I get your point. It's really tough to do out there. And I'm not sure whether in the medical realm, when I hear people start to get into this kind of minutia, it's so they can justify not doing anything about it. And so for me, I know you guys aren't that way, but for me, that's what I hear. It's like, you know, if somebody's, well, we don't need to do anything because of X, Y. And it's like, no, we do need
Everything's
to
broken, so let's just go home.
Exactly. This is a very common argument. Okay.
That's
Yeah.
my 4 o'clock every day.
yeah, so the linking in essence is basically you combine two pieces of data and that creates new information, and that the fact that there's new information that the individual might not be aware of or might not want to be revealed, that's the privacy element there. But yeah, I completely agree with you, Christopher. We don't have to yeah,
Boil the ocean.
exactly.
Yeah.
Because that's the challenge with those privacy threats. Sometimes you can't avoid them. In an ideal privacy respecting world, there wouldn't be any personal information being identified or linked or stored or processed or whatever, but that's, well, we need that stuff. So we need to figure out which threats are actually threats and which threats are, well, features, basically.
We talked a little bit about on a prior call, we talked a little bit about supporting different types of controls. And obviously we're going to approach it from a security perspective with our lens on, but it might be interesting to also capture privacy specific controls. So when you're thinking about taxonomy and whatnot, think about, you know, also in a separate bucket of things, like controls that we can use to prevent unnecessary, what would be the word, availability of the information, I guess.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, there's some research out there. There's privacy strategies and tactics and those things, like separate and hide and abstract and high level strategies to help fix that.
Yeah.
I don't know at what level of abstraction you were thinking for controls.
Nothing too concrete, because otherwise, again, we're going to be boiling the ocean.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So not interested in doing that.
And again, I mean, some of this stuff is complex. I mean, even if you've got those kind of mitigations, how effective are they really? The
Right.
president of the United States didn't do anything. Okay, it was people around him that did things. Okay,
Right.
how
Right,
do you
right.
make that? How do you make that leap? Okay, intellectually we can do it, but I don't know any other way to do it that's machine readable.
Right. I mean, some commercial, I don't know if the open source tools do this or not, but some commercial threat modeling tools, as you probably know, I mean, you've got controls to mitigate a known threat, right? And then what you can do on some of these tools is say, well, this control is going to mitigate the threat, 60%. And this other control is going to mitigate it by another 20%. Well, combined, that's not 100%. So what are we doing about that other 20%? Well, do we accept the risk? Is it just a known thing?
Were those initial percentage figures swags, or were they actually informed by something?
Right,
Okay,
exactly.
geez, this seems like a good 80% solution.
I
You
was
know?
just gonna say,
Right.
yeah.
Yeah.
Exactly. So I don't think we want to get into risk acceptance in the spec, at least not initially anyway. I think that's a rabbit hole we should probably avoid.
Yes, definitely.
Okay. I'm glad I have agreement on that.
No, it's just that I'm thinking that if you go into acceptance, then you have to go back into mitigation, and not only the suggestion of mitigation, but the acceptance of mitigation. And I would not
Right.
want to have that reflected in the threat model. I think that the
Right.
threat model should have the risk, the suggestion of a mitigation, but what you do with it, your
That
problem.
belongs in a GRC somewhere.
If
Yeah.
if you want that risk to disappear from the threat model, then you mitigate it and you change the design,
Right.
so that the threat doesn't get regenerated next time that you create a
Yeah.
threat.
Got it. No, that makes perfect sense.
And of course, you version the whole thing so that you can go back and figure out what is it that you did that you are lying in the representation.
Right.
I think that's
Okay.
the first Python script we write, is determine what we're lying about.
No, we say that we're going to write that, but we don't.
Truthability.
Truthability.
It's a sliding scale.
Everything
So
is for changing values of truth.
So it's a good 80% truth again. We're doing swags on these again.
T-shirt. Huh. Anyway.
Oh, it's 100% truth that I was just making numbers up.
Yeah, Isar, you still have an empty T-shirt today. I mean, what's wrong?
This is what I wear when I don't have anything to say.
Oh.
I just need some chalk.
For
I
context,
can write
he
on that.
normally has a quote there. Yeah.
Actually, I wanted to get like a flexible electronic paper, ink paper, and put it on a T-shirt and be able to change it from my my cell phone. That's my next project.
That's cool. Now we just need to figure out how to hack that. So while you're on a Zoom call, you can change the message in real time. Let's see, Kim, question for you. When do you think realistically, based on your schedule and all that, when do you think you can have something for the group to review?
If it's just like a very rough structure of a couple of attributes and maybe some 1 or 2 subcategories of data, I can do that hopefully in a week. Well, or hopefully even by the weekend, but I don't want to overpromise. So that should be like rather quickly.
Okay.
But that being said, don't we need like the foundational attributes for this TM bomb first rather than just the privacy add-ons?
That's fair.
I mean,
Yeah,
I will write
well,
that,
we need
and
them
maybe
both,
that
but yeah.
inspires the whole team to do the rest as well. I can write down some stuff too about that, but
Right.
yeah.
Let me actually share. Let me share again. The Blueprints team is working on some taxonomy things in their little bubble. Where is it? Google Drive. I'm having a brain fart here. Let's see, where was that? Oh, this is more about behavior. This is, yeah, these are not. Well,
Right, I've got to drop. Kim, pleasure to meet you. Izar, Steve, nice to see you
Yep.
guys again.
all right, take care. Yeah,
Oh,
this is not exactly.
we may have John McCoy join us in the near future.
Okay.
Interest.
Yeah, I saw him join. I talked with him at after ThreatModCon when we were all hanging out.
Yep.
Okay. So yeah, maybe Kim, if you had that list and we met up in another 2 weeks, maybe that would actually kickstart like the security discussions as well, because we haven't actually had that yet.
Yeah. Okay.
So and we're gonna need the privacy stuff anyway. So
Yep.
okay. Well, we only have a few more minutes. I'll put the recording up on YouTube later today. Any closing thoughts, suggestions?
Nope. I think that I have to connect with John and see if we can get at least our side of the thing going on.
Yeah.
And we'll wait to hear from you on the consumer side.
Yeah, awesome. Let me know if you have any questions on the spec. Be glad to help. And yeah, with that, have a great rest of your day. Thanks for joining. Talk to you soon.
Bye.
Cheers.